A group of Chagos Islanders have landed on the island to establish a permanent settlement, more than 50 years after the population was evicted from the British colony.
Yes, it was described actually by Nigel Farage in that press conference there, but it's all been led by the self-declared First Minister, Mislay Mandarin. The four-strong party defied a British exclusion zone and says hundreds more Chagossians will follow them, declaring, "We are here to stay."
Well, we're joined now by the former MP Adam Holloway and First Minister of Chagos, Mislay Mandarin. Wow. So you're on the island. So are you effectively on the islands illegally, is the question?
This is British territory and our whole British passport. How this can be illegally? The only thing illegal, Keir Starmer handing British territory to a country like Mauritius, which is not British.
Now, this is a fairly extraordinary thing that's taken place here. Just describe where you are, because this isn't the island that hosts the base. This isn't Diego Garcia. This is another island that used to be inhabited by Chagossians, but had to be moved when the base was created.
Yes, but that was unnecessary because where we are now on Peros Banos, and the base is like 2 days boat to get to that base. So here, we are perfectly safe. And I came here, Adam helped me a lot doing this plan. We are here to stay.
Wow.
Look, the reality is, in the 1960s, the British government wanted to stop having to pay for the occasional food ship to come here. The excuse used was that there was a new base. It's 120 miles away. So I've got a guy over there I'm looking at who, in fact, let's come this way. Michelle, who's in the background there, he was 14 years old when he was basically, they were rounded up, they were put on ships, some of them in manacles, their dogs were gassed, and they were sent to live in poverty in Mauritius, where they were basically called unspeakable names and told they weren't worth educating. Finally, a lot of them came to England when the British government finally gave.
Right, so picture this. You're the Prime Minister of Britain. You've just handed over a chunk of British territory to another country without asking the people who actually live there. You're spending £35 billion of taxpayer money to make it happen. And then one morning, you wake up to find out that the very people you evicted are back on the islands, they've set up camp, and they're basically saying, "Come at me, bro." Welcome to the absolutely bonkers saga of the Chagos Islands, where Sir Keir Starmer just got served the political equivalent of "I dare you" by a former bus driver who's now living on a beach, claiming British territory, and possibly saving you billions in the process. I'm not making this up. This is real life. This is happening right now. And if you think British politics couldn't get any weirder, buckle up, because we're about to dive into one of the most extraordinary acts of peaceful rebellion you'll see this decade. Before we get into the madness, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because this channel covers the political chaos that mainstream media either ignores or completely sanitizes. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. So, let's set the scene. The Chagos Islands. Beautiful archipelago in the Indian Ocean. Think crystal clear waters, pristine beaches, the kind of place that shows up on screensavers and makes you question your life choices. But this isn't a holiday destination anymore. This is ground zero for one of the most controversial political moves in recent British history. And at the center of it all is a man named Mislay Mandarin, the Chagossian First Minister, who just pulled off what can only be described as the most British act of defiance imaginable. He went back home, set up a permanent settlement, and basically told Keir Starmer, "I dare you to remove us." Now, to understand why this is such a massive deal, we need to rewind a bit. Back in the 1960s, the British government decided that maintaining the Chagos Islands was too expensive. They wanted to stop paying for occasional food ships to reach the islands. The excuse? A new military base was being built. Never mind that the base, Diego Garcia, is 120 miles from where these people actually lived. Details, right? So what did the British government do? They rounded up the entire population, some of them in literal manacles, gassed their dogs, yes, you heard that correctly, gassed their dogs, and shipped them off to Mauritius where they were treated like absolute rubbish, told they weren't worth educating, and left to live in poverty. Let that sink in for a second. British citizens, forcibly removed from their homeland, their pets killed in front of them, dumped in a country that didn't want them, all so Britain could save a few quid on supply ships. If that doesn't make your blood boil, check your pulse because you might be a robot. Fast forward to today, and here's where it gets absolutely mental. After more than 50 years in exile, many Chagossians eventually made their way to Britain when the government finally gave them passports. And just when you think the story couldn't get any more twisted, Sir Keir Starmer rocks up and decides, you know what? Let's give these islands to Mauritius, the same Mauritius that treated these people like dirt. What could possibly go wrong? On May 22, 2025, Starmer signed a treaty with Mauritian Prime Minister Naveen Ramgoolam, transferring sovereignty of the entire Chagos Archipelago from the UK to Mauritius. The official line? The UK wouldn't have a realistic prospect of success if Mauritius pursued legal action. Apparently, we were weeks away from some provisional measures order. So instead of fighting, instead of standing up for British territory and British citizens, Starmer just handed it over. Oh, and the price tag for this surrender? £35 billion. That's billion with a B. Your money. Taxpayer money, money that should be going to defense, to the NHS, to literally anything other than giving away British territory. But here's where our story takes a turn that's so beautifully British, it almost makes you proud. Measley Mandarin, former bus driver, current Chagossian First Minister, wasn't having any of it. So he did what any reasonable person would do when their democratically elected voice is completely ignored. He got on a boat with former MP Adam Holloway and about 50 other Chagossians, sailed to Paris Banhos, one of the islands in the archipelago, and set up permanent residence. Speaking to GB News from literally standing on the beach of the island, Mandarin dropped this absolute banger. This is British territory, and we hold a British passport. How can this be illegal? The only thing that is illegal is Keir Starmer handing a British territory to a country like Mauritius, which is not British. Mic drop. Absolutely brilliant. This man just logic bombed the entire Chagos deal. How can British citizens living on British territory be doing anything illegal? They can't. The whole thing is absurd, and Mandarin knows it. He's not just making a political statement, he's exposing the fundamental lunacy of the entire situation. Now, Adam Holloway, who's there with them, explained it perfectly. He said the British government's excuse in the 60s was that there was a new base, but that base, Diego Garcia, is a 2-day boat ride away from where they're currently camped. So the idea that the Chagossians had to be removed for security reasons is complete nonsense. They're perfectly safe where they are. They're not interfering with anything. They're just existing on land that their families have lived on for generations. Holloway pointed out something crucial. What we're hoping to do by having this a permanent settlement here, what we're hoping to do is we have successfully changed the facts on the ground. And that's exactly what they've done. For years, one of the government's arguments has been that nobody lives on the Chagos Islands anymore, so handing them to Mauritius is no big deal. Well, guess what? People live there now. Facts have changed. Game over. But Measley Mandarin wasn't finished. He sent a message directly to Keir Starmer that is equal parts defiant and heartbreaking. He said, their excuse was that there's nobody on the island. Now we've got people here. My dad was born in this place right now and got exiled, and he's back. I dare Keir Starmer to remove my dad again. That will be a great crime against humanity again. I dare him. Those 3 words are doing some seriously heavy lifting. This isn't just political theater. This is personal. This is a son standing up for his father, for his family, for everyone who was ripped from their homes and told they didn't matter. This is a man who gave up everything, his job, his life as a bus driver in Mauritius, everything to come back and reclaim his homeland. And he's putting the Prime Minister on notice. If you want to remove us again, you're going to have to own that decision. You're going to have to be the person who forcibly evicts British citizens from British territory for the second time in history. Can you imagine the optics of that? Can you imagine the footage of British forces removing peaceful protesters, families, elderly people who were forcibly exiled decades ago, removing them again from their homeland? It would be a PR catastrophe of epic proportions, and Mandarin knows it. He's essentially called Starmer's bluff. Now, let's talk about the strategic insanity of this whole deal. Adam Holloway raised a point that should terrify anyone who cares about British security. The Chagos deal risks the Diego Garcia base falling under Chinese influence. Mauritius has close ties with China. This isn't conspiracy theory stuff. This is geopolitical reality. By handing sovereignty to Mauritius, we're potentially giving China a foothold in one of the most strategically important regions in the world. And we're paying £35 billion for the privilege. Holloway said it perfectly. The human rights that matter here are the rights of these people who've lived in exile for 60 years. It's morally indefensible from a geostrategic point of view. Risking that base to China is a shocker. Morally indefensible, strategically reckless, financially insane. Pick your angle. The Chagos deal fails on every single one. And the fact that it's being pushed through despite massive opposition, despite the Chagossians themselves saying they weren't consulted, despite the obvious security concerns, tells you everything you need to know about how this government views British interests. Measly Mandarin put it in terms that everyone can understand. He said, "I was a bus driver. I left everything for my homeland. I came here. When I was a bus driver, I would pay my taxes to Mauritius. Now I'm here. We are saving £35 billion of your viewers' money, British tax money, just by me being here and claiming my island as British, because I'm British." Think about that. A former bus driver is potentially saving £35 billion just by standing on a beach and saying, "This is ours." He's not asking for handouts. He's not demanding compensation. He's just asking to live on the land his father was born on, the land he has every right to call home. And in doing so, he's exposing the entire Chagos deal for what it is: an unnecessary, expensive, and morally bankrupt surrender of British territory. Sir Keir Starmer's justification for the deal was that the UK wouldn't have a realistic prospect of success in legal battles, that we were weeks away from some provisional order that would have been catastrophic. But here's the thing. Since when did Britain back down from legal fights over our own territory? Since when did we just hand over sovereign land because a court case might be difficult? We didn't do it with the Falklands. We didn't do it with Gibraltar. But apparently the Chagos Islands aren't worth fighting for. Except they are. They absolutely are. Not just for strategic reasons, though those are significant. Not just for financial reasons, though £35 billion is an obscene amount of money. But for moral reasons, because the Chagossians deserve justice. They deserve to be heard. They deserve to have a say in what happens to their homeland, and they certainly deserve better than being treated as an afterthought in a deal negotiated without their consent. So here we are. A group of Chagossians have set up permanent residence on Paros Banhos. They've changed the facts on the ground. They've called the Prime Minister's bluff. And now the question is, what happens next? Does Starmer back down and renegotiate the deal? Does he send forces to remove them, creating an international incident and confirming everything his critics have said about this government's priorities? Or does he just ignore them and hope they go away? My money's on option 3, because that's what politicians do when they're caught in an impossible situation. But here's the thing. Measly Mandarin and his people aren't going anywhere. They've waited over 50 years for this. They've sacrificed everything to be there, and they're prepared to stay. Mandarin's father was born on that island. He was exiled in the 1960s, and now he's back. standing on the beach where he was born, reclaiming his home, daring the British Prime Minister to remove him again. That's not just political protest, that's poetry. That's justice demanding to be heard. So there you have it, the Chagos Island saga in all its chaotic, infuriating, and oddly inspiring glory. A former bus driver taking on the prime minister, a group of exiles reclaiming their homeland, a £35 billion deal that makes absolutely no sense from any angle, and a government that seems determined to push it through no matter what. What do you think? Should Starmer back down? Should the Chagossians be allowed to stay? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this video valuable, share it with someone who needs to know what's actually happening with British foreign policy. Thanks for watching Brit Hour. I'll see you in the next one.